Here's another reason why you want to take control of what you're doing.
Everything kind of funnels into the only winning move is not to play the game.
I don't know, guys. This whole thing sounds pre-recorded.
Who are those young guys in that intro, man? Fuck, dude, that was so long ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was back when we first got started. We had to make our own electricity, and we had Dixie cups with strings tied to them so we could talk and we get across the country. It was really something back then.
It was too much, man.
You know, right? And thank God for the Western line that finally got us so we got a train out there where we could finally meet.
Tapping on rocks to do a podcast was just impossible.
Oh, right. And meeting via steamship in the Panama Canal was just getting fucking old as hell.
Welcome to another episode of the Weather Report. And as you can see, we don't have a guest today, but no problem. Me and Ken are going to take over the show. Ken's going to take over the show. That guy right there, you're going to take over the show. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. But really, both of us are just kind of, we're exhausted today, right? It's been one of those weekends where it's been, Ken's, it was like 85 degrees and 85, with humidity, which means it was 185 where he was. It was like 100 here in Gilroy, California. I went golfing yesterday and everything just zapped all the energy out of me. I'm sore. My shoulders are sore. Everything's sore. And I golfed terribly, but I had a good time. But,
I'm sorry about that, Bruce. I'm having what we call technical issues.
Are you having technical issues?
All of a sudden, the thing I went to play 10 minutes ago when we were trying to get ready for the show that wouldn't play just started playing. So
nice. There you go. And that's modern podcasting for today. We're tapping on stones still.
Exactly. So I'm gonna tap on a stone. So why don't you talk about a little bit? We're gonna talk about some interesting stuff today about music and why. All right, ready? We're gonna both be boomers here. New music sucks.
New music definitely sucks.
But we have receipts. We know why, and we can explain it. So, Bruce, why don't you go into that for a minute while I cue some other stuff up?
Because basically what we're going to talk about today is that Ken turned me on to this guy named Rick Beato. And Rick Beato has a YouTube, he's got a YouTube page that has like 5.5 million freaking subscribers to it. And the guy is a music producer from way back. He does interviews and he does exposés on music and how it is today and what they've done with music and how music sucks. Because really, being a boomer right now, I just turned 65 years old. I couldn't tell you one popular song right now. Not one. Why? Because music is so bad. I yearn for what I used to listen to back in the 70s. I yearn for like the Marshall Tucker Band. I yearn for like Peter Frampton. I yearn for like the Rolling Stones, not the new Rolling Stones, the old Rolling Stones. I yearn for all those bands like ELO. Like, Ken likes Rush. I'm not a big Rush fan, but Ken's a big Rush fan, and so is Dutch is out there. She's a big Rush fan. So I yearn for all that music that meant something, that was actually produced on like old archaic stuff that was just, they don't use it anymore. In fact, everything right now goes through all kinds of modulation and adjustments and all kinds of stuff to make it sound the way it sounds. And since me and Ken are both musicians, we decided that we're going to this week talk a little bit about music and talk about, just stuff that's going on in our lives as far as music is concerned. Because, he's got his, what is that there? What do you got going on?
That's my Rush. It's my Rush YYZ glass.
Oh, gotcha. Well, I just got the old-fashioned Pacifico, the Pacifico Clara stuff, So that's what I've been sipping down all day.
So let me jump in. Music, old music versus new music. Now, every generation thinks that whatever the kids are listening to today is not as good as what they listen to. And sometimes that's been true. Sometimes it wasn't true, but it always has changed. In the days of World War I in that area, the popular music was like John Philip Sousa, which was incredible. And then jazz came out and took over. And everyone that liked John Philip Sousa, a lot of them would look down on their kids, watching the jazz with the people with the reefer,
Yeah.
And it was this black music from down south, this blues thing that was coming out too, and it was looked down upon. However, hugely popular with the youth. However, it was all incredibly good musicians putting out great music. Then, to give you a little bit of World War II came and everything kind of went weird for a while, just with everything in the world. In 1940, after the war happened, people were coming back, music was going. Now, remember the big bands were the big names back then.
The big bands,
Count Basie, Duke Ellington,
Dorsey, and all those
Glenn
guys.
Miller, Tommy Dorsey, Stan Kenton, Lionel Hampton. I mean, these guys were absolutely incredible. But these were
Ricky Ricardo.
These were 18-piece big bands. And so it was very expensive to put an 18-piece big band on tour. And the people at the record companies realized, wait a minute, if we can get some singers and just put a rhythm section with them, we can do that. Now, the first rock and roll song that's known is called Rocket 88. It was by the wife beater extraordinaire. What's the name's escaping me? But it was called Rocket 88. And it was a song about, of course, it was an awesome song because it was about a Rocket 88 Oldsmobile. That was the first pretty fast V8 car that America made. And it took off. I think it was 52, 53. It was Ike Turner. Ike Turner made it. So then Elvis came along, and of course, all of the 50s rock and roll stuff. But the record companies realized, wait a minute, we can have one or two guys, just throw some musicians out wherever they are. And this is a lot cheaper. But the other thing that happened, you got to go back to 1947 when things were starting to change. You start to get like the Bing Crosby singers and stuff like that they realized, okay, we can just hire musicians wherever they are. We can ship this one guy around the country and make money like crazy. There was a strike. So there was a music strike and all the musicians stopped playing. And right then that killed big band music. I mean, it took a while for it to really drain out. That was the blow. That was the first pin of 1,000 pins that killed big band music as being the most popular, because big band stuff was the top music for a long, long time. And rock and roll came out of that whole world. And a lot of the same musicians were playing in it. And you ended up with, then you had Elvis, and Elvis turned everything on its head. Now, my dad, who's a musician, and I'll play you something that my dad played so you guys can have an idea where I'm coming from. He used to say Elvis Presley should have had his arms broke, or he says Elvis Presley should have had his arm broke in 1957. He set the music industry back 50 years. My dad was not a rock and roll lover, so it was pretty funny. What he meant by that is suddenly you just had a guy that could come out and sing and dance. Didn't have to be super talented, because Elvis wasn't super talented. He just wasn't. He was a good singer, but what he was an incredibly good entertainer. That's where his talent was. But as a musician, he was a good singer. He wasn't anything great. He was no Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin. He couldn't sing nearly like those guys could. But he had something there, and they figured it out, and that went through. Then in the 60s, now you had the British invasion. Now all of a sudden, the British invasion came in, and all the American bands are like, whoa, what's going on here? Beatles, Stones, The Who, The Kinks, Jeff Beck, Led Zeppelin, it just goes on and on and on. That changed music again. Then music turned, because music was never political until the 60s. And you boomers, I'm not going to say you ruined music.
Us boomers.
Yeah, you boomers, you didn't. I'm not going to say you ruined music, because you didn't. You came out with some of the best rock and roll ever made has been done by protest songs that were number one. What were they? They were good music to start out with. I can't stand Bob Dylan, but I give him credit because the guy knows how to write an incredibly good song. He can write a great song. I just don't like his performance. I'm just not a Dylan fan. Right. But anyway, so then you get into the 70s and things changed again, because now you started introducing, Herbie Hancock and some of the guys that were doing the jazz fusion, they were like, it's rock, it's jazz, but it's really not either. And it's kind of just this whole different genre. But that started bleeding into mainstream, plus technology. Moog, the Moog synthesizer that came out in the late 60s.
Oh yeah, that changed a lot.
Your Moog synthesizer, and at that time, then the blues people were playing the Hammond organ with the Leslie amp. And you had that, like if you listen to Boston's first album, there is so much Hammond organ in there. And it's incredible. And people forget that was a thing from the 50s and 60s that blended into more modern rock and roll. But then you had disco, you had just the soft rock thing, the jazz, you had, the Parrot Head stuff started coming out. But then you also had Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Tower of Power.
Don't forget the Candy
Chicago.
Rock. Don't forget the Candy Rock back in the early 70s. All that Donny Osmond stuff.
Yeah.
All that
Bubblegum
stuff.
rock.
Bubblegum. That all shaped everything that you guys are. I don't want to say that you're listening to today, because what I listen to today, when I think about listening to music today, I don't even know what stations to go to, but when I get to a station, I go like, what is this? And especially country's way off. I mean, way out there. I mean, country might as well just be rock. I mean, really, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's more really, it's blended together. It
is no longer the 3-4 note little ballads and stuff like that are crispy and twangy anymore.
Think about the Glenn Campbell country.
Yeah.
In the Roy Clark country.
Right.
And
that was a little bit more evolved than
these guys are players. But this is what I'm getting to. All of these people were players. All of your bands. There's someone you need to look up. If you're listening, go look up Carol Kay. She was a bass player, and she played on just about every rock and roll bass hits. She played bass for the Beach Boys and
part of the Wrecking Crew.
Part of the Wrecking Crew, exactly. It's a great series. Watch that movie, The Wrecking Crew. It's fantastic. But in Glenn Campbell, that's where he came from. Everyone's like Glenn Campbell, the rhinestone, cowboy thing, and that whole deal. And it's like, no, the guy was a mother effer on the guitar. Yeah. Absolute
Roy Clark.
Genius.
Roy Clark was a fucking genius on the guitar. Oh my God. You go back and look at Roy Clark back in the days, they all said, oh, that guy came in from Hee Haw and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But man, Roy Clark was probably one of the best guitarists ever.
Top 10 in the world.
Yeah.
Top 10 in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
He could show Eddie Van Halen was nothing compared to Roy Clark.
Yeah.
But then it all morphed, and then you had disco, and the disco thing came out, and we were all taught to hate disco, even though we secretly couldn't hate it because it was amazing.
I love disco.
I do too.
Disco was amazing, dude. I'm sorry.
And as a drummer and a bass and someone that's trying to learn bass, I'm just learning disco like crazy. I dig it. But there was that disco was really it morphed out of the jazz and funk, the Chicago, the horn bands and all this kind of stuff. The disco morphed out of that, and you had KC and the Sunshine Band. Well, they were just one step below like Chicago or a Tower of Power, who were really trying to be serious musicians. They like, we can do that and be pop and make.
Then you started getting funk and you started getting R&B, and that's where freaking your rap and everything else started coming in from. I mean, but rap started way back with Cab Calloway and those guys.
Yeah,
that's where kind of rap were kind of.
Cab Calloway was the original rap artist. Yeah. He was fantastic, and I was fortunate enough to get to know him because he was a friend of my dad's.
Yeah, tell me something about we were going to talk about your dad anyway. So, but you grew up with a whole bunch of musicians. We were talking about this during dinner time today because my mother-in-law, who's watching the show right now, was going like, "Oh, I cannot wait." Yeah, I can't wait to watch what's going on. It's going to be real interesting. And I started telling her, I'm going like, Ken freaking had their house guests for like, you name it. They were Ken's house guests.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about your upbringing and your dad and
sure.
It's just, yeah.
My dad is a consummate musician, professional genius. I've never met another musician that had the breadth of knowledge about music than my dad. I mean, he was really incredible. He was a composer and arranger, and played trombone, played piano. He started playing in 1947. I think he published his first piece of music in 1952. He died in 2022 at 91. And up till 3 months before he kicked the bucket, he was still conducting the Phoenix Union Musicians Union Big Band, which is a bunch of basically retired old guys that have played with everybody.
Yeah.
And I've got some clips on them on a YouTube site. I'll cue something up later from that. But he was a trombone player that was, again, top 10 in the country. And I'm bragging. He's my dad. I mean, I'm bragging. It's funny because he grew up around it. You don't think of it much. But, you know, he ran the Fairbanks Summer Arts Festival up in Fairbanks, Alaska from like 1971 to somewhere in the 90s, I believe. I don't know the exact dates. I can't remember. But we used to go to that quite a bit. So I've been to Alaska a whole bunch of times. And one of the years up there, one of the things my dad would do was he would bring, and you think about Fairbanks, Alaska, art festival and music, that must suck. It was enormous. I mean, the whole state was there, but my dad would bring people from all over the country. So we were from Boston originally. And many of his friends were in the Boston Symphony Orchestra and the Boston Pops, which are, of course, two of the best known musical groups that ever has been, right? And so he'd bring them up and we'd have a ball up there. So I'm up there just hanging out with, these are all just guys that were my dad's buddies, and they were all really cool, but they were all at the top of their game and musicians. And I learned a lot from them because a lot of them also did session work. They got called in the studio to do some stuff. And my dad, even at 87 years old, got a call at his house in Fountain Hills, Arizona, to fly out to LA to play some background keyboard on a movie called, you might have heard of it, Crazy Rich Asians.
Right.
So, he was doing that kind of stuff. It was really cool. But he composed and arranged music for, we've got, I think, 5 file cabinets, 5 big, tall, extra deep file cabinets of music he hand wrote. And Bruce, when you were out here, I showed you some of it. It was kind of cool to see, It's just,
exactly. Yeah. I remember.
So let me do this. I've got something queued up here. I'm going to add this to stage. So just to give you an idea of the level of kind of what my dad would do, I'm going to play a little, it's a trombone solo he did in 1982 at the Fairbanks Festival. So let me add this to stage here and make sure we can hear it. And tell me if you don't hear it. All right. Is that good?
Oh, I got it. Yep.
My dad playing trombone. We'll just listen to this for a minute or so. And that's Bob Winter on the keyboard, Freddie Buddha on the drums. They're both from the Boston Pops. High notes, baby. That's a lot of air. When he yelled at you, you knew it. You hit some really good high ones in this next part. He was 50 years old at this point.
Those are 50-year-old lungs right there, huh?
So, but I'm going to let something else go here too. So that was him. The next guy that plays a little solo right after him, play a little bit of this. Like I said, I'm playing this one to show off the old man and how great he was, but to show some of the people we were with. So when I'm talking about music, I have a background. So the next thing, this is Bob Winter on the piano, and he was the pianist for the Boston Pops and I believe the Boston Symphony Orchestra for many, many years. One of the greatest piano players, like Oscar Peterson level, if you're familiar with Oscar Peterson. So this solo is one of my favorite, most melodic pieces of music. It's great. It's about a minute long. Oh, a quick bet. Fred Buddha, that's playing drums on this, was also the drummer for the Symphony Orchestra in Boston Pops. I took drum lessons from him.
Nice.
Went for 3 weeks, every single day for like 2 hours, drum lessons with him. It was insane what I learned. Now listen to what his hands are doing, left and right. And how everyone else is hanging back. This is music, man. And this is live. This isn't a recording. This is
I know,
live. Love it.
I can see how you love it, man. I can see how you love it.
You know, when I'm talking about musicians, this is what I'm talking about. There's one little part coming up. Listen to this right here. One guy playing piano. It's one freaking guy. So, it goes on and on. You can go to my SoundCloud. If you just go to Ken Madden SoundCloud, you can find this whole concert. It's about an hour long, and many other concerts. But it's really, this is where I came from.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, since we're doing this, I mean, I've been, like I said, I've really wanted to be talking about your dad for a long time, dude.
Right.
And I know that you miss him a lot, because
Don't make me cry. Don't make me cry.
I'm not going to make you cry, but I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me about these pictures that you sent me.
Oh, sure.
We're going to go through them. So let's go one by one through these pictures here.
Cool. All right. This is my dad's buddy. That was the bass player. And for the life of me, I can't remember his name because this was before I was born. So look at that car. That's an Austin Healey.
I know. All right.
And he's the bass player. And I'm not talking like a Fender Precision. That's a stand-up bass. And and it's winter, and you'd strap it to his car and drive to gigs. Can you imagine?
The weather could not be nice to that thing, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, what's going to happen when you bring
be able to have that thing to be able to have that thing tuned right there, and then go into a warm studio and go like, uh-oh.
But really, Bruce, do you even need to tune a fretless stand-up bass? It's fretless. So. You can just kind of make it up as you go along. So yeah, that's one of my favorite pictures. So this Patty Page, rather, not Patsy Cline, Patty Page. So back in the day, like I was mentioned before, a famous artist would record the album with musicians there in their studio, and then they would travel around the country, and every different place they would go to, or little area they would go to, they'd hire local musicians, and they'd have a rehearsal, and then they'd play, however many gigs. So say like Patty Page comes to Boston and is going to be playing in New England, so they'd hire my dad, and he'd travel with her a little bit, play the gigs, and then the other people around. And my dad was also one of the guys that arranged for the other people to come in, and he put the band together basically for the traveling people. And he worked with somebody in the 50s and 60s called Ruby Newman, and that was kind of the main guy in the Boston area to set up musicians, the top guys. So my dad got to be the kind of the society, if there was a society event, they hired my dad's band. And so this is how he got to do stuff with these people. So they'd all sign, the famous person comes in, you play with them, you get to know them pretty well, and you hang out, and, you might be doing 8-10 shows with them. You get to know them, hang out. And so, you get pictures and all that. And that's just one of the many pictures he's got.
Yeah.
I forgot I sent you these.
Yeah. So a secret that is lost with a lot of people that go to concerts is that, my last concert that I actually, big concert that I went to was Eric Clapton. And everybody thinks that the whole band travels with Eric Clapton, and he's got the same musicians with him all the time. No, I have a very good buddy of mine who's a session musician, and said, "Hey, dude, I'm going to be playing with Eric Clapton for the next 4 nights. It's fucking awesome. I might be going down the West Coast with him." So that's the whole thing about being session musician. If you're good enough to do that, like these guys in the Wrecking Crew, but the Wrecking Crew is a totally different animal than session musicians who get invited to play with your famous people. You know, they might need a bass
Well,
player, they might need a rhythm player.
You had
know,
two
whatever.
you had two different separate people. Sometimes it was the same guy, but you had
Yeah.
two different groups. You had the groups that people that played in the studio and the groups that went on tour.
Right.
So the groups that people played on studio were usually a lot more landed. They were usually in a main area. They didn't feel like touring. They didn't want to do that whole thing.
Right.
And then you had the people that toured with the band a little bit in different areas.
Yeah.
So it would save the record companies a ton of money because they could just hire people wherever they go, and then they don't have to. They're not putting up hotels for 10 guys and
Right,
and
exactly.
all the equipment and gear and all that. They're just like, nope, we're playing the Esplanade in Boston, and we need 6 guys in the rhythm section.
We need you for a week or two because we're traveling up and down the East Coast, and that's what we need you for.
Exactly.
With X amount of money, man. Here you go. I mean,
In big bands like my niece, it's my brother-in-law's daughter. And it was from his first marriage, not the second. So anyway, it's my niece-in-law, I guess we'll call her. And she toured with, we talked about Rush a little bit. Rush had a string section on one tour, and she was one of the people she played viola or violin in the string section and toured with Rush for 5 or 6 months. You know, so there are bands will grab a group of people and tour with them. Especially if they're really big name bands and they really have a show that they put on, like Rush, you can't get just local guys and play Rush songs. They're just too far out there. But like a regular, you know, you're playing like a regular country song or Taylor Swift. You can hire any musicians anywhere to drop on. You don't have the same guys. You just don't. It's easy shit. It's not hard to play.
Yeah. Let's talk about this lady right here. Let's talk about this lady.
Oh, yeah. Some people might know her. If
Fitzgerald, I think so, right?
It's what?
Is that Ella Fitzgerald?
Absolutely.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Yeah.
And she signed that for my dad. So he played with her a few times. Played with Louis Armstrong actually quite a bit. Those guys, and he got to be friends with Louis Armstrong, pretty cool. And we actually, our family in 1962 threw him at a gig. They threw him it was over the 4th of July, and he's out playing, and my dad's playing, and it was out east, and they threw him a surprise birthday party. He's like, yeah, it's surprise. You don't get any family here and stuff like that. Well, he was an orphan. He was adopted. And he told him, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. He's like, because he always said he was born on the 4th of July, right?
Yeah.
He's like, he goes, you know what? I was a black orphan at the turn of the century. It wasn't exactly record keeping like they gave a crap. He goes, I have no idea when my birthday is, but the 4th of July just seemed like a good date because this country is everything to me. I'm like, what a cool story, and it's funny because I didn't hear that until like 15 years ago. And this happened in 1962, and it just, it's that generation. They don't talk about what they did.
Yeah.
And so I chased him down. My mom put together all these pictures and put them in a she started scrapbooking, and dad's got a million pictures. So she started just doing it. And that's where these are from.
So you took some lessons from some very famous people, of course.
Mm-hmm.
You've had exposure to a lot of musicians. What was your I have my brush with fame on being on stage with somebody who is very famous here in the Bay Area. His name was Ronnie Montrose. They used to have an open jam.
Really? With Ronnie Montrose?
With Ronnie Montrose was on stage.
How cool is that?
And I got up there one day, and to tell you the truth, I just put my guitar on silent and just kind of faked it as much as I could, because it was just, I mean, you're on the stage with Ronnie Montrose. I mean, really, yeah. Everybody else is just lucky to be there. We're all,
right.
Most of us are. I mean, there's a lot of other, musicians there that were, leaps and bounds better than me because I'm a small time musician. But I mean, that was my brush with fame. What is brush with fame? Have you ever been on stage with playing actual music? Have you ever played actual music with anybody really famous?
Dude. I had Cab Calloway was up in Alaska, and I got to do not like a concert with him. We got to do a song together. Because there was a youth band up there, and this is when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I played drums, of course, and it was a jazz band. And he came in and did some songs with us, which was just incredible.
Right.
What a guy! So there was that. I've had I was in a band here in town in Minneapolis back in the 90s called Blues and Orphans. They're a blues band, and we'd run across people constantly. There was one bar named Bunkers that it was kind of like the Paisley Park go-to bar for the musicians that they would go, they'd go hang out, and because they can't drink down at Paisley Park. He was really staunch about that. Didn't want people drinking and smoking around him, which is ironic that he died of a drug overdose. But it was really cool there because I got to know Michael Bland pretty well for a while there. And I haven't talked to him in it's probably been 25 years now, so he probably doesn't even remember who I am. But Michael Bland was Prince's drummer in the New Power generation.
Oh, wow.
Enormous guy, unbelievably talented drummer.
I'll tell you what, Prince is an unbelievably talented freaking
musician,
period. Producer, musician, freaking everything all the way around.
You can like him or not like his music, but you can't say that he didn't have talent, because man, he
knew how to play so many instruments.
But he also knew how to find musicians and prop them up and get them. I mean, you look at Morris Day in the time, and Apollonia, Sheila E. All these people came out of the Prince Revolution.
Yes,
and they're all what? They're all incredible musicians. Morris Day and the Time still play around, and they're still awesome. But all of those guys would come to Bunkers, and it was a little dive bar in Minneapolis, and they'd play. And it was one of the places that the bars are supposed to close at 1, but not Bunkers. Yep. It just went till they were done playing.
Campbell, California was the same way. That's where, I got on stage with Ronnie on a Sunday afternoon. But I mean, you could go there. We had Huey Lewis in the News. We had all the Bay Area bands would come and play any place it was in Campbell, whether it be Thursday night through Saturday night. And then Sundays were open jams and stuff. We had JJ's Blues where we'd get BB King and all the blues guys in there, man. It was a crazy time back in the late 70s, early 80s, even into the early 90s. It was pretty cool. Tell us a little bit about this guy.
Oh yeah. Paul Anka. So Paul Anka, my dad played with him quite a bit. So this one says, "To Sherry, you're a doll, a sweetheart." What's this say? And so's your dad. So's your daddy. He's 100%. So my sister was, and this is. So Paul Anka was a
that's a young Paul Anka right there.
Look at that. I mean, there's a handsome son of a gun. But he was a heartthrob, a childhood heartthrob of all the. And this is late 50s, early 60s. Well, this is probably mid 60s now. And so my sister was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and the fact that he would write that to her because Dad played with her, and I think they went to the concert and they met. Because we'd all go to the concerts and go hang out with the band afterwards and musicians. It was fun, but Paul Anka was a really nice guy, and he was really good to all my brothers and sisters as well. And they didn't have to be, these were superstars, and but they were all these guys. So first of all, most of these singers were pretty damn talented, and that were singers, and they appreciated talent. So my dad was, as you just heard, pretty goddamn good. He played piano just as well as he played. He wasn't quite Bob Winter, but pretty close. Yeah. And in fact, this was one of the things
you've told me.
When Bob Winter would play the piano, the guy we just heard for a minute ago, my dad would be watching him, and you could just see him. Oh, how did he do that? Oh, that's really cool. What is that? And he would just brag about how great Bob Winter is. And he's like, I'll never be a piano player. He is. Guy's the best in the world. It was really cool because here's my hero saying, no. There's always somebody better.
Yeah, give me a story.
Learn from them.
Yeah, give me a story about, because you've told me a couple of stories about being a kid, traveling with your dad, being backstage with all these other crazy musicians and their kids.
Yeah.
And tell me what that looks like.
So there used to be something called the Ice Capades, and it went on for quite a long time, and it traveled the whole country and probably the world. And it was just basically ice skaters, figure skaters dancing to music, and they made a show out of it. And before the advent of pre-recorded and all that kind of garbage, they'd hire musicians, and they had a pit, and you played in the pit. It was a regular, 10 or 12 piece or 18 piece, 20 piece, depending on, what the production was. Same with Barnum and Bailey's Circus. And then there was the Frolics too, the Ice Frolics. There was the Capades, Ice
Right.
Capades, Ice Frolics, and Brian Mobility. And my dad played all of them. And this is back in Boston Garden. And that's where the Celtics used to play, and also where the Bruins played.
Right.
So you being a sporto, you'd like this.
Exactly.
So the Bruins had finished playing their game. The Zamboni would go around, do their deal. They'd throw down a tarp and then put the parquet floor on top of that, on top of the ice. And then the Celtics would play on the parquet floor on top of the ice. Now, if you ever watched, this is leading to something, believe me. If you've ever watched old clips of the Celtics in the mid 80s when they were at their peak, the Larry Bird years, and Robert Parrish and Danny Ainge, and they were just unbeatable.
Mhm.
One of the reasons they were unbeatable is because the Boston Garden wasn't air conditioned very well. And so it'd be summertime, but it'd be, end of May, June when they're doing the playoffs. Well, the ice would start to melt and it would start to sweat on the floor, but only in certain areas. Well, everyone in the Celtics knew what it was. So if you watch those old games, guys are wiping out constantly because they're on a polished parquet floor that has water on it, and ice underneath. And so the technology wasn't quite there. It's not like that anymore. But so anyway, that's what they do. And this is the Boston Garden. So they take the Celtics floor back out and just run the Zamboni around. And here we go. Here's the Ice Capades, the Ice Frolic, in the Frolics. And so there'd be sometimes, I think, I wouldn't say 3 to 5 shows a day, because you'd have a morning one, and then you'd have a matinee, and then a late afternoon, and then 2 evening shows. And so I'd go with my dad in the morning, and we'd get back home at 11:30, 12 at night, and I'm 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And you'd never get away with this today. So, and my mom didn't care. She's like, oh yeah, you'll have fun. And so you go to the Boston Garden, which is a pretty big place. And, you start out boring as hell, hanging out in the room with all of the musicians as they're getting ready. So it's just, it's people warming up their musicians, they're tuning everything. And, it's chaos.
Everything smells like brown shoe and instruments.
Yeah, exactly. It smells like the instrument room in your high school. And then people around, and of course everyone's smoking because it was the 70s. So it's just a smoke filled room. And, giving each other crap and all this kind of stuff, and talking about, there was always somebody talking about the other guy that he drank too much, or I got to hire him, but you want to make sure you don't let him drink if it's all that kind of stuff that we all do in bands. It was no different, and even at the level of these top players, it's still
don't share his mouthpiece with him. Don't share his mouthpiece.
Don't share the mouthpiece. Yeah, make sure you watch your kids, watch your daughter, because he's kind of a dog. But anyway, so then we're there. And so usually a couple of them would bring their kids too, and you never knew who was going to be there. And these are kids that the only time you ever saw them was at the Ice Capades and the Ice Frolics. And then the skaters and the people that were traveling with the show often had their kids too. And so you, of course, have never met them, but those kids are exotic because they've traveled around with all these people and been to LA and in Dallas and,
Chicago, Philadelphia.
So we would just go running because, neat, dad's playing in the thing, but you know what? I'm in the Boston Garden with zero parental, supervision. I have no idea where anything is. It's super easy to get lost. All the security guys kind of knew, hey, if there's some just lost kid, it's probably one of the musicians' kids. So we can always just guide them back to the musician's room. And that happened to me a couple of times, or ended up sitting there. I'm like, I had no idea where I was, and I ended up back in the musician's room, in their dressing room, waiting for the half an hour for the show to end. And I'm just like, hey, Dad, hey, what are you doing? He's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I don't know. I got lost. They brought me back here. He's like, oh, all right. Don't do that again. And of course, I went right out and did that again.
Right.
But one of the guys that was a security guard there had, this is a story I think you're talking about. He had something back in the day. There was something called Super Balls, and it's not a dirty thing.
Yeah.
They were Super Ball. It was made out of some sort of alien rubber from Roswell, New Mexico, that they found in the alien spacecraft, because you could bounce that ball and it would not stop bouncing. I don't think you see them anymore because too many of us got our eyes taken out and bludgeoned by them. And remember, you had the small ones.
You throw them once and they're gone.
Yeah, they were about the size of a cherry bomb, and then they had the other size that was just a little bit bigger than a golf ball, and those really hurt. Those are the big ones. So there was a hallway that went from one section of the building to another, and it was cement walls, cement floor, cement roof with a steel door on the other end, and about 70 feet long. Now, this guy, the security guard, would bring a bag of these Super Balls, and all of us kids, it said to be like 7 or 8 of us kids, and we're all 9, 10, 8, 9, 10 with Super Balls in a 70-foot cement hallway. I mean, someone always threw up because we were laughing so hard, because it was just, you can't not laugh, and all the games that you come up with. So, and then sometimes I'd go and watch the show for a minute, and as long as I was back to where Dad needed to be when the show was over, we all knew when the show was over. And then we go backstage where the skaters are getting ready. So I got to see all the props that they have to roll, they because it had all these props and sets and stuff that they, rolled out on the ice.
Always wanted to be the kid that got, carted away in the sleigh or whatever they had on there. It was never that kid, were you those kids?
It was like Willy Wonka's. It was Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory. That's what it was like. When I saw that movie, I'm like, Dad, this is just like when we go to this is just like it. Because someone always took you under their wing, and like out of pure kindness. And this is what the thing, I think all these traveling, carnies or what. I'm like, no, it wasn't like that. Everyone looked out for everybody. And it was really something. And it was all brought together through music, and they'd sell the garden out. They'd do 9 days. It would just sell out. What else are you going to do?
Yeah. Let's talk more about these pictures that you gave me here. So here's Bobby Darin.
Bobby Darin, baby. Mac the Knife. Yep. So my dad and Bobby Darin were good friends. And I never met him that I know of, because I was born in 1968. So a lot of this stuff was happening well before I was born. But he was another guy that was just a great singer, good musician, excellent energy.
Even up into the 70s, early 60s, early 70s, he was still doing stuff. I remember listening to some of his music. Here's one that I remember back from my days when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. This is Leslie Uggams.
Yes. So this was one that you know more about her than I do. I know my dad and her got along very well, and I seem to remember meeting her, but I don't have much recollection of her. But I know that she was. So what's your memory of Leslie Uggams?
Leslie Uggams was more of I guess she was a pop singer of the time back in the late 60s.
Yep.
Not quite your Rocky type thing, more back into the the adult contemporary stuff that I remember. Right. My mom and my dad listening to. You'd catch her on.
If it was the 90s or 80s, she would have been Sade.
Yeah, exactly. That's what she would be. But I just remember her being iconic in any type of like the Jackie Gleason show or all the popular shows that were going on back in the late 60s. I mean, she appeared on everything. She was on Dick Cavett. She was on Johnny Carson.
She was on everything.
Yeah, she was on everything, and just a very, very talented singer. Couldn't tell you one song that she ever sung, but believe me, she was a very popular person back in my younger days. I remember her.
And back then we had entertainers. We had people that were Tom Jones was another one. A lot of people know Tom Jones's name, of course.
Yeah, Tom Jones.
Entertainer in the same genre. There was this whole kind of like subgenre of Dionne Warwick is one other one.
It wasn't rock. It wasn't rock.
Yep.
It wasn't country. It was adult. I want to say they call it adult contemporary. They would call it now. Adult contemporary.
It's kind of a soft rock. But
maybe the precursor to soft rock,
but had a real there was definitely a jazz influence, but it wasn't jazz.
It was definitely the breakaway. It was a breakaway that when Jack Haley and the Comets came out and did Rock Around the Clock, and then there was that split there. And I think that's where people like Johnny Mathis right here.
There you go. Johnny Mathis.
He wasn't in that rock and roll thing. He was in the other type of.
It's when rock and roll and pop started to separate.
Right.
Johnny Mathis was a pop singer,
right?
And but he was actually a jazz singer that did pop. And so a lot of these jazz singer guys, they saw the writing on the wall, and they're like, well, we can get into this thing over here, this rock and roll world, and pop, and boy, this is going to work out. And it did.
Incredible, man.
But you still had to have the talent. You had to have the pipes. You had to be able to do it. And it was hard work because there was no auto tune. There was no. You had to be good. If you sang off key and poorly, you got booed off the stage, and you never came back from that. You would just you were done.
I don't know who this is.
This is oh, what's her name?
I don't know. I can't read the name to tell you
Abel
the truth.
Jane. This was one. It's just slipping my mind. My mom knew her too. Another well-known singer from back then. I'm sorry, I don't have the.
I couldn't tell you either, but she's
in the 50s. That's back in the 50s, but she's lovely, isn't she?
She's a great looking gal right there.
It's Abel.
That's almost like a Taylor Swift DNA or something like
Yeah,
that.
so this was another, like I said, the name is escaping me and I can't read it right there. But she was another one that was in that same genre we were talking about, in the very well known but not rock and roll, pop, jazz, because even the big band jazz guys were still big back then. Yeah, there you go. That's with oh goodness. So this is my dad.
Yeah, we are spinning. This is your dad right here?
Yep, that's my dad with his trombone.
Right here, yeah.
Which I have that very trombone in my back room.
Look at that guy. Look at that guy.
Yeah, that was oh, what's her name? Doris. It's Doris something. Not Doris Day, of course, but
no, not Doris Day. Wow.
And that guy was well known too. God, I can't remember the name. I hadn't planned on this tonight, so otherwise I would have talked to my mom about it.
That's all right, because I'm just gonna hit you down memory lane anyway. So here we go. We got the 4 aces here.
Yep, 4 aces.
Now that was kind of a not rocky, but more of a pop quartet, right?
You can remember there was like the 4 tops, 4 aces. There was a whole bunch of groups that were just the singers.
Yeah.
And again, they could fly anywhere, and they'd hire people to come in. My dad was one of the guys that played. You know, they'd have a band with a little 10-piece band with a horn section, and then they do standards. You know, they had their own music, but then they do some of the standards. And this is back when you'd go to a concert, and there's
Norm Crosby.
Norm Crosby, exactly.
Norm Crosby. This is a guy that would probably play with Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin,
yes,
Sammy Davis Jr., all those Rat Pack guys.
Right.
That's what this guy was. He was one of the cool guys. You go to Vegas, and these are the kind of guys you would rub shoulders with if you were lucky enough to be in their presence.
So I'll mention this. So if you go to like if Kiss or I'm trying to think of some of the old bands that are still touring, you know, well, Earth, Wind and Fire, they still tour, right? And Chicago still tours. So people go and see them, you know, and you know, Do You Feel Like I Do? What's his name? You know who I mean.
Oh yeah, Peter Frampton.
Peter Frampton. My cousin's an absolute nut for Peter Frampton.
Yeah, absolutely. So am I. I'm a huge.
Yeah, he was great. He was great. My names and I'm fried, so I'm just losing names. But so you think about now, okay, so that was, you know, let's just say 30, 40 years ago, this music was popular. These people come around now, and it's an older crowd, you know, Poison, you know, in my world, it's Poison, Duran Duran, any of those people come around. It's an older crowd of people. Well, in the 50s and 60s, when rock and roll was hot and kids that were just listening to rock and roll, their parents and their older brothers and sisters were still listening to big band stuff. We're still listening to Frank Sinatra. You know, Frank Sinatra hit his peak in the 60s. I mean, the Rat Pack time. And Duchess is Duran Duran. Duchess is in the house. How you doing,
Duchess
sweetie?
in the house. Good morning.
You.
It's not good morning. It's good evening.
Yeah, it seems like good morning when we're talking to her. It will be a good morning now that we have talked with her. Yeah. But this was these bands in all through the 70s, and you look at Johnny Carson, it's kind of go watch some old Johnny Carsons from the 70s. And it seems like there you go.
Guy, Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett. Fantastic. Another incredible musician. And he, I think my dad played with him many times, if I remember right, because it's funny because I ran into him. I'm at the airport. We were picking up somebody at the airport that was flying into Minneapolis. I was in college. I think one of our friends was flying in. Me and my buddy Corey were there. And we see a gentleman standing there with a sign like this that says Tony Bennett, you know, and like, well, what the hell, Tony Bennett? Now, Tony Bennett's he's a short guy, he's like 5'5", 5'6". And he comes walking out, and I knew him because my dad knew him. And so, you know, I walked over to him, and this is before he got popular. Remember, he did some MTV stuff in the early 90s, and all of a sudden he got popular again. This was before that.
Yeah, exactly.
So he was a guy that was just the old guard. Time had passed him by. He'd
Right.
go on Johnny Carson, do that kind of thing. So I ran up to the enter, and my buddy Corey knew who he was too. And I'm like, "This is Tony Bennett. Let's go say hi." And I'm like, "Mr. Bennett, so nice to meet you. And I'm a big fan of your music." And he's like, "You guys, this is great. How do you even know that I'm how do you know?" I'm like, "Well, my dad's played with you a bunch of times. His name's Eddie Madden." "Oh, trombone player. He's fantastic." And I was like, winning.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was cool to see, but then he got popular again. But anyway, fast forwarding to music, as we were talking about some of these pictures and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, go to the next one. I know what you got on cue right there. Liberace. Say what you will
Say
about
what you
Liberace.
will about Liberace, but
He was
the
a
guy
good
knew how
piano.
to plug some freaking 88 keys, baby. Let me tell you.
He was a good piano player, not an incredible piano player, but like Elvis, he was there was very few people that could entertain a crowd like Liberace.
He knew
And
he knew how to play the crowd. And he
Yep.
played the crowd in Las Vegas for decades. He
Yeah,
was the
absolutely.
headliner. He was a resident.
And I got a story about him. So we mentioned John Philip Sousa in the past. He's the guy that does the marches, like the Monty Python theme. That's John Philip Sousa. All right, so that's the kind of music he did. Keep that in the back of your minds as I'm telling this story. So it's like 1956 or 57, somewhere in there. My dad's playing with Liberace in the band, and he's a young kid. I mean, 1957, he would have been 27. He's a 27-year-old kid. And Liberace was at the peak of his peak right there. He was a huge, huge star. And my grandma he was like next to Jesus. There was Jesus right here, and then right there was Liberace. And they're playing this thing. I think they were up at the Frolics. I might have been the Frolics up in New Hampshire. Anyway, it wasn't the Ice Frolics. It was just a outside band shell or concert hall. And it was a resort. That's what it was. And so they had the big audience there. My grandma and grandfather, they got good tickets. They're sitting, right in the front, 4 or 5 rows there. My dad's in the band. And there's another couple that were having a wedding, or they just got married. And then this was my grandparents' 40th wedding anniversary. So they got married in 1917. So this would have been 1957. So imagine 1957, you're already married 40 years. That's pretty cool. So Dad plays, and kind of before the show, they're talking with Liberace. We're going to do this show. We're going to change this up a little bit tonight. We're going to do this song instead. The normal stuff. My dad says, I'd really like to. My mom and dad are here, and it's their 40th anniversary, and she loves you. She thinks you're, here's Jesus, you. And he's just like, "Oh yeah, that's cool. I'll make a mention of it for you there." And so they start playing, and they stop, and like I mentioned, there's a newlywed couple there, and he goes, "We've got a special group a special couple in the crowd tonight. They're celebrating an incredibly special event in a mark of your, and he's Liberace, so he's just gushing, and the people in back start clapping, thinking they were talking about them. And he's like, "Not you in back. You guys just got married, and that's great, but you got a lot of time in your life. I'm talking about Agnes and James Madden sitting here." and he called out my grandparents. My grandmother instantly just lost her mind. Just was like, "Oh, this is just incredible!" And there was after they played one of the songs, and my dad had the trombone solo. He sat down at the end of the song, everything claps. "Oh, thank you." And this is Eddie Madden on the trombone solo over that. And my grandmother stands up and goes, "That's my boy. It's my son." And then afterwards, she got to meet him, and he signed a headshot. He signed a picture, and that hung literally in the kitchen next to the picture of Jesus on her wall till the day she died.
Even before Reagan.
Yeah, even before that. It was like
even before Jack Kennedy.
Yeah, this was right before that.
Liberace, Jack
I mean,
Kennedy.
my grandfather was, he didn't have to go and fight in World War I, but 1918 he was in the army getting ready to go when the thing ended. So, but it's just a fun story of I wish I knew more and more of them, because there's thousands of these stories that just never got out because they didn't talk about this stuff.
Yeah, this is so cool, man.
It was just,
I mean,
just life.
the stories that you've told me about the people that you've met, the people that have been at your house when you were a kid, all that, it just amazes me. And I do have one other brush with greatness, but it was it was from an Americana guy that does a lot of folk music. His name was Chuck McCabe. Chuck McCabe used to be actually a freaking band called the Boomers back in the 90s at a place called I can't remember the name of the bar, but anyway, I used to hang out there a lot. And they would get together and everybody would sing, their songs and everything. They were a copy band. And it was kind of slow on a Wednesday night, and they were there and everything. And all of a sudden they wanted to play Margaritaville. And we were all getting hammered and stuff. I was buying them drinks. We're like, hey, Bruce, come on up here. Let's sing Margaritaville. First time I've ever been on stage. This was before Ronnie Montrose. First time I've been on stage with Chuck McCabe, the great Chuck McCabe. He died back in 2008 or 2009 of liver cancer or something like that. It was really, really bad. But I sung my first song on stage. It's been a whirlwind since then.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, singing Margaritaville was one of my favorite songs. It was one of the favorite memories I've ever had, and it was just fantastic and great.
Well, what you find? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, but the people that you have, brushed shoulders with is incredible, man.
But you know what? Here's the deal, though. They're just folks.
I know they're just folks.
And I know you found this too. You get together with these guys that are superstars, and as long as you just treat them with respect, and they don't want to be fangirled, because you can sniff that away. You just want to talk to them and just be like, you know what, that riff you were doing, what was that? That's a cool little thing. Oh, it goes like this, and try it. They're the majority of them are really great folks. Yeah. And we're all crazy. I mean, if you're an artist or musician, you're nuts. You're batshit to do this. Right. And you have to be.
You are. Yeah. It's
like a functioning alcoholic. We've all had that friend that's like, I don't know how you do it, man. You just get up and go to work the next day and everything's cool. I don't know. Well, that's what the mind is of an artist, musician.
Can't do that no more.
Yeah, exactly.
Ken, I knew once we got onto this subject that I could push all of this stuff on you and bring up all these good memories and your dad and stuff, man. I know I don't want to make you cry, man, but your dad was something special. I got that CD and I stick that thing in every once in a while to listen to some of the music on there, and it is so freaking great. I love it, man. I just love it.
Whoops. I just had another faux pas.
Another faux pas? No, you don't faux pas. You're a professional podcaster. We're almost 100 shows in. You got to be more professional about it.
Here's where I screwed up. So the music I was playing earlier, it was on a cassette tape that I got in 1982 from that concert, because they recorded them and then they sell the tapes for the next year. And I have one copy of it. The masters are long gone. No one knows what happened to them. So I bought a digital. It looks like an old tape deck, the old tape deck, like, the answering machines used to use, like in the beginning of Rockford. But it converts it to a digital file. But it took that whole concert and made it one file. So I was going to play something for the way out, and I've got to find it there for a minute. So,
okay. So I'll let you look for that.
Talk amongst yourselves for a moment while I look at this.
Definitely will. And as we were saying before, when we were talking about, music has just not been the same since, as far as I'm concerned, since the 90s, since the early 90s, I lost touch with everything. I mean, there's been a lot of bands, Counting Crows, a whole bunch of other bands and stuff that have come and gone since the 90s, early 2000s, but I really lost touch with music since then. But there's one thing that I wanted to share with everybody here, and that's a movie that I've seen that'll kind of take you to where you need to be when we're talking about all that old music that you hear. And this movie is called The Wrecking Crew. And when Ken was talking about the bass player, her name was Kay. She played on almost every freaking song that you can ever think of. All these guys, Campbell, and everybody that you can think of were all the people that played with Frank Sinatra, the Byrds, Sonny and Cher, the Monkees, Dean Martin, Elvis, Nat King Cole, the Beach Boys. All these guys were the ones that got together and they're the ones that actually made the music. And after that, you had predecessors like Phil Spector. You can go out and you can see some Spector stuff. A real cool documentary. I couldn't find the documentary on the Googles and stuff. I'll search it out later and maybe put it in the show notes. But Phil Spector was he created the wall of sound thing, where a lot of people,
and batshit crazy.
yeah, and he was batshit crazy for sure. Yes, he was batshit crazy, but just these producers that made music that meant something, that made you feel something, that wasn't, just all generated by auto tunes, by a bunch of just what it is now, which is just digital stuff. And there's no creativity. I don't hear any creativity. There's very few times that I'll listen to a song like anything new now. I mean, Ken and Jason, those guys, you guys are into some heavy metal stuff. I was never really into heavy metal, any of the speed metal stuff like that. It still doesn't ring my bell, but those guys that were back in the late 70s, early 80s, man, those guys like the Marshall Tucker Band, those guys like Peter Frampton, those guys
Marshall
like
Tucker was fantastic.
Alice Cooper, Rod Stewart,
Doobie Brothers, for crying
the
out loud.
Doobie Brothers, man,
Yeah.
just from the Bay Area. Tower of Power,
Skinner.
Power, man, Skinner, you name it, man. All those, we've lost touch with that part of our musical history that we need to get back really, really bad. I think that's what we need to do.
I've got a nice little closing out tune that we can play here. So in the world of Cab Calloway, he of course had kids. He was married and actually the same woman for a long, long time. And one of his kids is Chris, and she was an actress, and she played on a soap opera in the 80s called The Doctors. I think it was on ABC. But she was an incredible jazz singer that never thought she was that great at it. Enjoyed it, but was like, I just not, I'm in my, it's one of the reasons I didn't go into music is because I had this, I had the shadow of my dad. I'm like, I'll never be as good as, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, so this is Cab Calloway's daughter at that same concert I played earlier. So it's the same band, same group of guys. And this is her singing. I'm going to play this because she should have been an absolute sensation and just never went into it. So sometimes they just never do that. So let me share and then add this to stage here and talk my way through it so I don't screw it up. Tell me if you can hear it. There we go. It'll be going here in a sec. Hear that?
Got ice fog up here, huh? Yeah, I heard about
Fairbanks, Alaska. Ice fog.
Now let me see, what shall I say? A foggy day in London town had me down. I feel the morning with such a light. British Museum lost its charm. How long I wonder would this thing last? But the age of miracles had passed when suddenly I saw him standing there. And before
Right, Duchess? I mean, come on.
was shining everywhere.
And this is Greg Hopkins playing the trumpet. He was the lead trumpet player for Buddy Rich's band and lead composer for Buddy Rich's band for years. So that's what I grew up with. And this is Greg Hopkins is one of our family's greatest friends. When my dad was 91, to do his final recording. He got the 18-piece big band. He had Greg lead it and put the musicians together. And they went to the WGBH studios, which is a major sound studio in Boston. And it's like PBS. And they recorded an album. And that's the album I sent you, Bruce, that one album. And it was the last one he did. And these guys are lifelong friends. I mean, they've known each other for decades and decades and decades. But that's the kind of thing. And Chris Calloway was one of the sweetest people in fame, I guess I would say. She's just a really nice lady. And what a voice. I mean, what a voice. So I know we're running up against the hour a little bit over.
It's still out there, man. It's still out there. There's still a lot of just talented musicians out there. And I would urge you to go out and just support any type of local people that you can that are out there actually playing instruments and not playing this freaking digital crap. Go out there and just go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just
Yeah,
put
and just
I posted a link. I posted a link to my SoundCloud if you want to hear more of this. It's all
okay.
free. I posted it out there for free for everybody because I want everyone to be able to hear some of his music, and a lot of my dad's music is on there. So there's a link in the comments there. When we put this up, Bruce, if you can copy that link, and
absolutely, we'll do.
we'll throw it up there. But you can go through my SoundCloud. Again, it's absolutely free. I just want to share this with the world, so it's go check it out. It's many hours of great music.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So yeah, we're running up, and Ken, God damn, man, it was a good time talking to you about your dad, about all the famous people that you knew, all the music that me and you have, witnessed. And unfortunately, like I said, I don't see it coming in the future, but I do know that there's a lot of talented people out there. Go out there and support your local music scene, your small music scene, because they're all filled with people like me and Ken that are out there. Every once in a while we'll get a wild hair up our ass, and we'll grab our instrument and go some cafe and play, but yeah, it's been a great ride. It's been a great ride.
Very often we do a second hour that the greatly expanding Patreon page gets to listen to. Now, Bruce, if you want for the second hour, we can talk about everything that we talking about in this show that we never got to.
We might do that. Just we'll see what happens in that second little
Sounds
half,
good.
man.
Sounds
all
good.
Right, man. Well, again, like share and subscribe to this podcast if you like it. Please share it with a friend or two, and share it with somebody that you don't like, because this show's growing every day. We're going to be back with another show next week, whether we have a guest or whether it's just be me and Ken and our gang of characters. Oh, and of course, Duchess is going to play the tambourine because she's the tambourine girl. She's the tambourine girl. But anyway, join us tomorrow on X. You can go over to X and check this out on the best morning show on X, and that is The Weathered View, live every morning at 6 a.m. Pacific time on your favorite podcast app. Or you can join us there on X, and you can discuss all that little stuff that we discuss on X, which is not what we discuss here. We're a little bit more free and go in there. But go ahead and sign up for our free newsletter over at www.weathersoul.com, or just go to weathersoul.com. Nobody uses the www anymore. And
Boomer moment.
Boomer moment.
Wah, wah, wah.
Ken, what about Mad K Studios? Tell them about Mad K Studios.
Are you talking about Mad K Studio, the
I'm
one-stop shop for all of your artwork needs? So, as an artist, I do a lot of artwork. So I do commissions there if you want something done. A lot of automotive art, animal art. I've got coloring books to relieve stress and anxiety for you adults out there that just need a moment to relax. This is a great way of doing it. And it's madkstudio.com, maddkstudio.com. And if you have any questions on there, just shoot me an email. There'll be a pop-up there, and jump on my mailing list.
How can they get a Weathered Soul or a Weathered Report mug?
Imagine you want a cup of coffee, but you don't just want a cup of coffee. You want a cup of coffee with some freaking attitude. Well, you can get a Weathered Soul cup of coffee from horribledesigns.com. That's horribledesigns.com. He makes mugs. He makes mouse pads. He makes stickers, magnets, can koozies, anything you can think of. You want one T-shirt that says something wild. You have an office party to go to, and you're quitting the next day, and that one person that's going to be there, you really need to stick it to. You can have Horrible Designs make you a T-shirt with whatever you want on it. That person understands the trauma that they have caused in your life. Horribledesigns.com. Believe me, you will not be sorry. Go check it out.
And you can support us by giving us a tip. Go to buymeacoffee.com/weathersoul and leave us a tip, because podcast is expensive and me and Ken are broke. So whenever you guys want to go over there and give us,
I need to build an engine for Suburban, so help a brother out.
There you go. Or you can do like the Duchess, and she became a Patreon member at patreon.com/weathersoul. And our newest member, who is which is Misanthrope Radio 2.0, that would be Lorenzo, if that's what his real name is. But anyway, he does our intro to the morning show, and we really appreciate that. So go to patreon.com/weathersoul, and you can always find us at the Weather View Captivate.fm for our morning show. So Ken, it's been real awesome, dude. We're having a real good time. And like I said, man, we're at the end of the show, so maybe we'll do some extra content, maybe we won't, but in any case, We just want to wish you guys, a great, great week, and be good to yourselves. We'll see you later.
Take it easy, everyone.
All right.